Hi, this is Brendan Murphy here, and welcome to the Please Do Something podcast. I'm a singer and a songwriter who will be talking to inspiring creative people about how and why they do what they do and some of the lessons they've learned along the way. Thanks for listening. As the four of us prepared to release a brand new album in 2024, I got the chance to sit down with my good friend Greg Canty over a series of episodes and talk about the albums that brought us to this point. Let's get into it.
"10 years on, Brendan, from Songs for the Tempted, and you're back in action with Classified Personal, 1999.
Yeah, and no more black. I think I was wearing red on the cover of this one, so it got a lot more colourful as well. I was in Dublin as well, so it was the first record that we made in Dublin. We'd moved down to Dublin. It was a whole new ball game.
That was a very body-hugging red top you were wearing. And I was wondering when I saw that cover for the first time, it was if it's not the four of us anymore, it's just the one of us. You ditched the other boys. I'm the main man here on the cover.
Yeah, actually, the cover of the record had less to do with that sensibility and more to do with the photograph. Basically, what happened was we had a photo shoot for the record in the Clarence Hotel when we were making Clarence Hotel, I think, the same place that we shot the video for Change. In fact, I think it might have been the day we shot the video for Change. I was wearing a blue suit, and the photographer, Redmond Cabot, fantastic photographer, he had the idea of shooting some stuff in infrared. I don't really understand it, but it turns colours, so it turns like blacks and blues, red sort of. When we saw all the photographs from the shoot, this photograph, just the red in it just was leaping out at you. I mean, it was arresting as a photograph. And we had the title of the album, Classified Personal. So the idea of it being of me worked with the title in terms of like, this is a personal sort of record. It was a bit of a statement that, yeah, this isn't going to be lots of drums and guitars and stuff like that. This is going to be something more intimate sounding. And that photograph was the strongest image we had. So myself and Declan, we just looked at it. We showed it to a few other people and everybody sort of said, well, that's your strongest photograph. And then we used it and it worked. It worked it was on posters all over Dublin. Whether you liked it or whether you didn't like it, you certainly noticed it, I've never been in that shape. I wouldn't want to be putting on that red when it was blue T-shirt now. I mean, I look at that guy and go, you were in pretty good nick there, buddy. For a guy at that point, I was in my mid-30s,
Where we left the conversation the last day was after your few years of minding Bruce. I think that came at the end of it. The poor dog who didn't know when to go to bed or when he should be sleeping. You made the move from Belfast down to Dublin. Amplifier, that was a huge crossroads for you. What was in your head about Amplifier at that point? Was it, okay, we went down a wrong path and we need to figure out the next one?
When we went down to Dublin, I think that at that point, the idea was still that maybe Amplifier we were going to put it out. We hadn't totally jacked it in. And I think we put a single out, Someone's Gotta Lose. And it just felt all wrong. It just felt, I didn't identify with it when it was a good way of testing the water because we hadn't put an album out. So we put this song out and just felt wrong. And it also felt like, I don't know how we're even going to promote this because that format of the band doesn't really exist. And I don't believe in it. And it's certainly not where my head is now. In a funny way, I felt a lot clearer than I did when I was making that record. And I was just tired of electric guitars. I remember saying to Declan, I think that you should be with an acoustic more. then you should use the acoustic more than you're using it. You're a great electric guitar player, but I think that remembering songs to attempted, it was just us and a couple of acoustics. I would like to get back to that again. So we set up and we both moved to Sandymount, and we had Pat O'Donnell, great musician, and he agreed to produce the record with us. And he said, look, why don't you just do it in Sandymount? And Declan's pretty handy on the desk as well. Not as handy as Pat though. So it was set up in a spare room in my house, and we just treated it like a day job. He would call in on a Monday, and we'd all land in about a cup of tea at 9:30 and get to work on writing the songs for it. And the idea was to have it really sort of the spare acoustic record, but we didn't know what the record was going to be. Basically, that works that way with every record, really. Records sort of, you can't really shoehorn a record. Just sort of have to let it reel itself through the songs that you write. And then at a certain point you go, oh, look, I've written 10 or 11 songs on this subject. Now, you can shoehorn it if you take a long, long time. You basically go, I want to write it on this subject, and I'm going to wait until I have enough songs on this subject. But that can eat up years, which I know because we've done it. But it also works. But we just started writing songs, and the pivotal moment on this record was when the first song was written, which was One More Shot. It was sort of unusual. I was singing with the guitar line, and it just seemed unusual. It seemed acoustic, but unusual, and that's what you're looking for. You're sort of going, okay, well, it's not enough just to make an acoustic record. You've got to make a record that's acoustic but doesn't sound like it could have been made by anybody else but you. That's the whole point. And with One More Shot, suddenly we found a way in, and I just had to write backwards from a title, and I thought, One More Shot, that's a good idea for where we're at the minute. We had the first iteration of the four of us, and we learned a lot of lessons in those years, myself and Declan, I think. You're asking your audience, you're asking them for one more shot at making a record, taking them to a different place, and one more sort of left turn for the band, and one more shot for us with the band, keeping the four of us name. By the time we had that song, we knew we had a record. All we had to do was keep writing in that format, and that's essentially what we did. And it was very sort of personal. I was singing in a different way. I think I was singing in a more low-key, confessional sort of manner, and it suited me. It felt natural. The whole thing felt natural, and pretty early on, I felt we're making the record we should be making. Whether anybody else will agree with us, that's another question. But the whole thing felt right.
Maybe I sometimes lie, but my crimes are small. One of these days I would have played it straight while the curtain call. I slipped up, that's all. Give me one more shot and I get right through to you. Give me one last chance, let me say what I wanted to. I died fast, a headphone blast, and the earth let go. The Grim Reaper rushed down to get in touch, said, well, will we go? As if he did not know. Give me one more shot and I get right through to you. Give me one last chance, let me say what I wanted to.
And the years between Amplifier and One More Shot, were you gigging? Were you still just playing around with ideas? What were you up to?
I think most of that time was eaten up in Amplifier land. We didn't leave Belfast until February 97. And at that point, we knew that Paul had left the band, and Peter and John. John had got married. None of them knew what we were going to do when we moved to Dublin. Even Paul, I think he wasn't sure what we were going to do.
Was Paul leaving a big deal? You know, the subject of class is very personal. That must have been the most personal change at that point, was it?
Yes and no. I think it was a relief. Paul leaving was a relief for himself, and a relief, I think, also for myself and Declan, because he could see we were at a crossroads, and he would tell you himself that basically he was interested in the band primarily for the fun, and he was happy to enjoy the ride, but he wasn't steering the vehicle at any point. So I think that it was a relief for us as well, because without Paul, we could go back to what really started it all, which was the two acoustic guitars, and it was less of a band and more of a songwriting unit, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
We didn't feel like we needed to make a bigger sound. We could make the sound that actually I think we knew we wanted to make. So it actually freed Paul up and it freed us up. We were all ready for the space, so we had no problem with that, and neither did he.
And you're talking about it being an acoustic guitar album. There's a beautiful track on the album that a lot of people wouldn't recognise, I think, which is Fingerprints, which is an instrumental. Is that the first instrumental you had on any of the albums, was it?
Yeah, that would be the first instrumental, yeah. I mean, we were just getting off on the style of the two guitar players. I have an odd way of playing the guitar. You know, like if you were a guitarist and you see the way I play the guitar, it's obviously self-taught and it's obviously limited in ways, you know. But Declan has had to work very hard over the years to make my guitar work. The way I play the guitar is not a straight way of playing the guitar. So he has had to develop a special way of playing the guitar to work with me. But when you put both those guitars together, you end up with something that's doubly unique. And on this record, I felt that this was a record that really played to the strengths of that sort of duo guitar sound hitting off each other. And I thought, oh, this is a sound. In a funny way, maybe this is more of a sound than anything the four of us has done in the past. It's more identifiable as, oh, that sounds like the four of us. Whereas in the past, I think because there was lots of other musicians involved, sometimes it was only me singing that made you think, oh, well, that's the four of us.
One More Shot was that like big Control-Alt-Delete moment. You were up and running again, you know, looking to your audience to, you know, are we still relevant 10 years after Songs to the Tempted? Which songs came next?
I think maybe It's You and Volatile came pretty soon after that. And again, they were both quite... Volatile was a song about a sort of a love letter to the city we'd left. It was a love letter to Belfast. Paul reminded me there only recently that where we lived in North Belfast in the early 90s, there was a lovely house, but it was a dangerous part of town. Taxis wouldn't pick you up from that part of town quite often.
A long walk home.
Yeah, they wouldn't pick you up from your. So there was an underlying stress, you know. The troubles were far from over at that point, and we were still in an area where you felt it, and that was also part of the to relieve the tension. Moving to Dublin was part. It relieved a lot of tension on that front. The song is about that. It's about the police on the street and the bomb scares and stuff like that, and the fact that if you just bad timing, the city would just grind to a halt for an hour and a half while they sorted out some bomb scare somewhere in the city. And the song is about that. The situation was volatile, the city was volatile, and we just wanted somewhere that we could straighten ourselves out, I think, and Dublin was an obvious choice. So the song itself is about that.
Maybe I like your style, but you're so volatile. I'm right inside you, but I can't find you. There's no one for miles and miles. Speeding up every hour like a drunk in a race car. I don't think you know just where the past and future really are. If you find out, I'd appreciate it if you'd share the information with someone who really cares. It's the middle of the day, no one's getting closer to the motorway. Time to watch the situation change. Kiss me up all night, count the hours before daylight.
Where you live changes you. Did that change you and did that form you? I presume it did it?
Definitely. I mean, now that I'm the age I am, I can see. I mean, there's songs on the current record that are talking about my formative years, both in Newry and Belfast. The songs on the previous albums, on Sugar Island, that talk about it. I've got kids now that are at the age that I was when I was going through it. And it's a completely different ball game. Like, it was rough. There is no getting around it. You were living in a war zone. That is it. The fact of the matter was that it was still, to some extent, a war zone as I was coming back to it in my 30s, but I was more sensitive to it then because we'd been away touring Europe quite a few years. And when we came back to that house, suddenly you began to see Belfast at that time, the way outsiders saw it when they came to it for the first time. I had a girlfriend from Dublin, and she used to get freaked out when I'd be driving around Belfast and there'd be a tank in front of her, literally with a young guy with a berry at the top, and he's got a gun and it's pointed aimlessly. He's just resting it. That doesn't make you feel any safer, really. So I mean, Belfast now and Belfast then, now they've got tour guides taking people to the places that you wouldn't have walked around in, back then. It's a very, very different city, but it was always a fantastic city. I always loved that city, but that's volatile. It's volatile. It's basically, I think it's maybe I like your style, but you're too volatile. I mean, I got to get out. It was, and also I'd ended with a relationship had ended. So it was about those two things. It was a relationship ending. It was a relationship with a city ending. A mixture of both those ended up in that song.
It's funny, for as many times as I heard that song, I never heard the Belfast part. And of course, Belfast gets a mention as well in Time to Turn Around.
I suppose that was me talking to myself going, look, a few years have passed here, Brendan, and there's nothing, no one can see anything, because the people around us, a bit like yourself, were wondering, what is happening? I didn't have answers because we were trying to figure it out ourselves, and musically, really, and actually more than musically, just generally. Time to turn around is basically saying, it takes time. It takes time to turn things around. And that's just it. I'm talking to you as if I'd figured it all out, but really, as usual with me, it just came out. But that's what it is. It's basically like, look, just, it takes time to turn things around. As long as you're moving in some direction, it doesn't matter, which is true. It doesn't matter how long something takes if you're constantly moving in that direction. It's when you stop and you're doing nothing and you're just analyzing until you're, blue in the face. That is when you're in trouble. So, when I was writing that song, we would have been in Dublin. I probably was looking back at the previous years, shaking my head going, oh, there's quite a few years there where you don't have much to show for it. It was a way of sort of like letting myself off the hook. And Declan, hey, it takes time to turn around, The song has got sort of it's sort of meditative, that track. That's probably actually my favourite on the album because it's got a lot of weight. The combination of Declan's guitar parts and Pat's production, it just really delivered because like Pat was playing bass on a lot of the songs as well. And if there was any rhythm, him and Declan were sort of concocting them. So I was very much left to take care of the melody, the words, and the initial guitar parts that get the song sort of off the ground,
Who was the uptight person on the album?
Me.
That song was about you, was it?
Yeah. Most of them are because I'm writing the lyrics. That song is basically about nightlife in Dublin. It was a fun city. It was fun to be in your mid-30s in Dublin at that time, particularly coming from Belfast. I suppose it was obviously, it was the complete opposite. You could stay out till 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and you walk home if you couldn't get a cab. It was the start of the Celtic Tiger, really. That sort of started the late 90s. This was this sort of inexorable rise in the South. It actually really started probably in the mid-90s, but certainly by the time we arrived, you could feel it. By the time a year later, by 2000, property prices were starting to get crazy. But there was still a sort of a general, euphoria is not the right word, but there was just this sense of, Dublin had a swagger about it that was a lot of fun to be part of. But I still, the northerner in me, I still, felt like sort of, it wasn't my city, So it's about, I think, that juxtaposition. Plus I was trying to figure out what we were at and what we were doing. And even though I might have been going out, I wasn't relaxed, really, when I think about it. And again, as usual with me, it just came out in that song. So it's about nightlife in Dublin. And that's why it's sort of, it's a fun song to sing because half of it's supposed to be I'm having a great time and the other half is, but why do I feel so uneasy,
At that time, was Dublin a big tax haven for a lot of these musicians from England, was it?
Yeah, well, that had started, certainly, that had started a lot earlier than that. I mean, I remember in the late 80s, you'd Spandau Ballet people, you'd be Tony Hadley walking up the past Leeson Street. So that had been going on a long time. This was less about that and more about the city itself. It was more about the opportunities that people that were themselves Irish and that were themselves Southern Irish were beginning to experience. And this a general feeling of wealth. It was on that inexorable rise that came to a grinding halt sometime around 2008. But, Ireland was right up there in terms of like party city of Europe, And again, I was a northerner, so I'd come from another side, so I could see it, but I couldn't really buy into it because I come from somewhere else. But it was fun.
And Come Alive, does that kind of follow along the same thread as Uptight did it?
That's just about having a good time and not thinking too much more about it. I mean, that is, For a guy who was moaning quite a bit on Classified Personal, the fact of the matter was it was probably the most social time of my life, really, because I'd been working quite hard. People I think when you're in a band that it's parties and nights out, all the time, but actually it can be quite pressurized. And of course, we weren't with Sony, we weren't with CBS Records, so we didn't have that pressure. We had a different sort of pressure, the pressure of like, well, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to have to pay for it. It's your money now. It's your money. You're going to have to finance this. You're going to have to figure out how to get this record in the hands of people. You're going to have to figure out how to get this record, which, by the way, doesn't sound too commercial to my or anybody else's ears. You're going to have to figure out how to make people interested in it on your own without a budget. You're going to be an independent artist for the first time. And that was a bit nerve-wracking but empowering, a combination of both those things.
So now you're really in the music business. It's not someone else's game. It's Brendan and Declan.
Yeah, that's right. And, you always said you want to control this, that, and the other. Okay, knock yourself out now. You're the head of the marketing department. You're the head of the finance department. You're head of A&R. So it was... we had to raise money for the record, so to get the record out, is to have a budget to promote it, because it was the old industry. People give off about this new music business. Let me tell you, the music business, when you were an independent artist, the music business of the old music business, I think, was a tougher game than today's world. Because now you can get your music out everywhere. You get your video up, so can everybody else. There's more competition. There's less people doing it then because it was more of a closed shop.
Yeah, it's really funny now that you're talking. There's a Cork little rap song that's been brought out by a bunch of kids from the Cabin, which is basically a project up in Knocknaheeny in a fairly rough part of town, run by a fantastic guy, Gary McCarthy. He's been doing this for years and years and years. In my own Brendan, his film, some of the lads from that whole initiative are in his movie and everything. But They have a little rap song, and Gary Mack brings these young kids in. He helps them. They generate the lyrics, and this has gone viral. It's everywhere. I mean, huge numbers of downloads and everything. And one of the big record companies in England are signing it, and it's really complicated because there's so many people involved. And I think they wanted them to come over to make an appearance in England. But that's really difficult because some of the kids are in direct provision and they can't leave the country, you know. But it was easier to bring out a record that could travel the whole world than for these poor kids to go from one place to the other, if you think about it.
How exciting is that? You know, I mean, I think it's tougher in a way because anybody can do it now. It needs a great idea. Whereas in the old days, you just needed to find a label to do the work for you. And then to some degree, they were supposed to do the marketing and, you know, get into the hands of radio. When you have to do all that yourself, a lot of people aren't built for it, I think, because it's a completely different skill set. And the skill set you need to write songs, it's a different world.
Pure release.
But we used to always joke about that song. We're saying that, imagine if we never released as a single. And one of the jokes that we said was the reason that we never released it as a single was because we could write our own review of it. Poor release. Because I remember there's some of the best bad reviews of our career were always really short. You know, my favourite was Drag My Bad Name Down. And I forget who it was. It was either Record Mirror or someone. But the review was, it was 3 words actually. Or is it 2? Maybe there's a hyphen there. Pseudo funk crap. That song was when we were in Amplifier Zone, when we were going mad in Old Cave Hill Road, writing this bunch of industrial, heavy, distorted rock music. And at the same time, we had 2 cassettes, 2 TDK cassettes. Well, I had 2 TDK cassettes, and one of them said industrial and one of them said organics. I think the idea was maybe that at one point I thought, you know what, we're going to release 2 albums at the same time. We're going to release a really heavy album, we're going to release a really acoustic album. And I can't help but take up the acoustic guitar and start and write acoustically, so I'm going to write. And Pure Release was one of those ones where I had the title and I had a lot of the words and I brought it into Declan when we were making Amplifier. So we had that song from when before we moved down to Dublin. And then Declan did some really interesting stuff on his guitar, sort of like a staccato-y type effects. So that's the single that got away. That's a lot of people's favourite song on that record. It should have been a single, but it wasn't. But it was track number 2 on the record, so it shows you just how much we liked it. But a lot of people who like that record love that song.
Smell so sweet long after she's left to eat. Tangled in a heap around her, careless as the night I find her. Window open, my senses reel. Out there is good for me. Suck it, smell it, breathe, inhale it. Check the room and then detail it. I can't resist it. I can't resist that tease. It's a pure release that hits me and makes me wanna breathe. I can't resist it. I can't resist that tease. It's a pure release that hits me and makes me wanna breathe. God knows where mercy goes, buried in the undergrowth. It visits in the night to haunt me, whispers in my ear to taunt me.
The sequence of the songs on the albums, now that you're talking about it, and like there's 14 songs. If you went back maybe a bit more than 10 years before it, you were lucky to get 8 songs on an album. You have 14. This nearly was your double album, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do that again. You know, I wouldn't. I don't know why there's as many songs on it. I think it was probably the start of that CD era where there was a point in the 90s where albums started getting longer generally. But the Pure Lease ended up being, it was more like we started listening to it and then it was like, oh, this is like a sort of a chill out record that you just let wash over you. So let's not try and make it too tight in terms of, so there was an instrumental on it. For us, it was quite a long record. I mean, we've made a new album, Crescent Nights, and that album, we had 14 songs on it. And now we've decided as we get close to it, there's only going to be 11. And it's going to struggle to hit 40 minutes. It'll be somewhere around probably 39 to 40. I mean, we've never made an album that's under 40 minutes. But this record might be. So we've sort of gone the other way now, where we've got to think the songs are like super strong. Whereas on that record, we didn't even think about that. It was like, they put an instrumental on it, put a lot of slow songs in a row. I think it was Tony Clayton Lee at the Irish Times said, it starts off slow and then it gets slower. You sort of think that it's the four of us, for God's sake, it's going to pick up pace, and it never does really, That's his favourite Four of Us album, funny enough.
The two Northern boys in Dublin, just as Dublin is getting really, really exciting, the world is your oyster. We go back to the album cover and you looking as fit and slim as anything. There's going to be a lot of romantic entanglements, and there's a lot of romance on this album, and I'm not sure if it's you or Declan. It sounds like there's makeups and there's breakups all over the shop.
Yeah, absolutely. What can I tell you, except it was great fun. I mean, you got to get your heart broken and you got to break a few hearts. That's just part of the fun of life. So I was ready for that, and that's what that was. But the record ultimately is about, you're sort of in between finding the right person. You're not finding the right person, really, Ironically, I did find the right person 3 months after that album came out.
You can never predict, can you?
No. But I'm glad that I didn't meet her until then, or the record might have got soft and cozy or something like that, Whereas there's sort of an unease with the record throughout the whole, it's an unresolved sort of emotional journey, really, as it was for me at the time.
Well, there's a Maybe It's You very early on in the album.
Yeah, that's right. Which is, and that, Maybe It's You. There's an example of a song where I had In Dublin magazine in the house because I just moved down to Dublin. And, In Dublin magazine was, for any of your younger listeners, the big, but what's that? It was the magazine to tell you what was going on in the big store.
Is this a physical thing made out of paper you buy in a shop?
Are you telling me you were unaware of this magazine?
I am aware of it, I am.
Oh, yeah, because it was a big publication. It wasn't an insignificant publication. It was everywhere in Dublin. But the back of it was personal ads.
Which for anyone listening is like the old day Tinder.
That's right. Yeah, Tinder, except you're paying for every word because you had to pay for the ads. And I remember looking at some of the ads, which the fact that I was single at the time might have something to do with, but I was looking at some of the ads and going, this is very like being a songwriter. You have to really get your point across in quite a short time. Every word matters. Every word's weighted. And I remember thinking, okay. And then the song sort of wrote itself because I was single and I thought, oh, well, I identified with the people in the ads, and lyrically the ads were used. A lot of the ads, which is why Pulp and the Spice Girls completely dates it. That was part of the song because that was in the actual adverts. And so I always say that I need to share the lyric credits with those poor souls that I hope met the right person at some point.
Well, hello there. If you're genuine and sincere, single, and would like to meet someone who is outgoing, vivacious, a little wild and wacky, for friendship and possibly more, leave a message and I'll get back to you.
I can't find my feet and I can't get to sleep. slowly slipping underwater. As I watch the nights get longer, I can't find the key that's turning inside me. Maybe it's you. All I want to do is light a cigarette, make another bed, roll the dice and start to sweat. All I want is everything tonight.
It's genius songwriting. There's a fantastic melody. It's loaded with humor.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, you know what? I think that was the first time that I sort of had that type of humor. And I remember thinking, oh, it'd be good to be able to do that again. You know, on the current record, I think the new record, I think is the closest I've come to that sort of writing, except I think I've not managed to do it over a whole series of songs. Time will tell whether that's the case or not, but it certainly feels like it. It's like that sort of a song. That song, maybe you could be on this new record.
As I was saying to you before we started recording, that was one I remember singing in the car with my daughter, Ellen, when she was about 7. And wow. We love that song. We absolutely love that song, as I'm sure so many other people do.
Actually, I've got a fun story about making the video. Declan made the video. He went up to Stephen's Green with a camcorder and a white screen. And he got him, and there was somebody else involved. So they asked random strangers, would they just sit for 5 minutes and be filmed for a music video? They got lots of different people. And then it was all put into a post-production studio, and we split screened. So it was like 2 people. So you could have 2 different people on each side. And then we tried to match people with people in the video. It's still one of our favorite videos. You can see it on YouTube.
That's always been something with you, and that filming that you do yourselves, you're still doing that to this day. Maybe the technology has got easier and it's a bit quicker and snappier to do everything. Even the videos for waiting game and everything else, you're still doing it.
Yeah, man, but you're right. It's got a lot easier. I mean, everything that's happened with technology has actually been really great news for us, for myself and Declan. But the video that I remember the most, and actually the video that really sold the record, was the video for Change. And the credit for that is really down to the director, Maurice Lannan, who is a friend and a very genius director. And he had worked with Bon Jovi, U2, the Cranberries, everybody. So when we approached him to shoot a video for this song, and he came up with an idea of, he probably was thinking changing, but his idea was he knew the Clarence people or the U2 people, and he got us the use of the unisex, or maybe it's the men's, I'm not sure, the bathroom at the Clarence Hotel, which is quite a stylish bathroom, and and his idea, which was genius, was basically for it to be a club, like a club bathroom. Imagine it's a club night, and I'm just in there, you know, in the middle of the night, and I'm just washing my face, and the mirror is the camera. So I'm singing to the camera, but the camera is the mirror, and the sink is in front of me. And then I remember him saying, look, now it would really help if you could get some of your clubbers. And just coincidentally, at that point, I had a friend from Newry who was very friendly with a clubby crowd that went to the Pod disco, which was a huge disco. I got to know them through him, and I asked them if they fancy being in a video on a Sunday morning, but they'd have to get up early. I'm not sure any of them went to bed, because they all landed at 9 o'clock in the best clubbing gear you could have imagined. And they actually made it as well, because it was so convincing. So I think Morris had some people that he had gathered, and between them and our people, and then his fantastic direction, and also it was brilliantly edited. The video itself, when it was done, really, it just looked like $1 million, and it was shown in a lot of places. And I remember when you two played Slane, the guys that I think that were involved in directing it were also doing the screens at that gig, and they were pumping it out, from the big screens, like sort of like every 4 songs, so we may as well be playing the gig. So that really paled the single up the charts in Ireland, and it just gave the whole record a visibility. And then, of course, it tied into the album cover, which was shot in you couldn't make this stuff up. It's just luck. And the record ended up working. It worked.
It's late, but not too late. Now you should know better than that. You're on fire without even knowing. I'm on the street saying things I probably regret. Just a way to get you going. Hey, running like rivers in the rain. Every time I see your face, there are some things that you should never explain. Stand up, slow down, and help to make me change. Take that right round the corner. It's insane. All I need is nothing on earth. She's got a black ink tattoo of a girl dressed in a scarf and a motorcycle. She's on the street singing mother of pearl, anything to get attention. You see yourself running like rivers in the rain every time I see your face.
And I'm going to drag you back to romance a little bit. And you're talking about luck and being in love. Let's Face It and Sweetheart, those 2 songs together, are they kind of joined, are they?
Yeah, they sort of are. I was really unsure about because those 2 songs are what I would refer to as demos, essentially. So, particularly Let's Face It. So, Let's Face It is me trying to figure out a melody and a lyric. And so I'm just singing and not thinking too much about what I'm singing. I think Declan, he really loved Let's Face It and Sweetheart. And I was going, yeah, but we'll do it again once you do a good guitar part and I'll finish lyrics and whatever. And then he did the guitar part and he went, it's done. And I was listening to it and I was going, no, it's not done. No, that's not it. I mean, that sounds like, I sound out of tune, and let's face it. It's obvious that I can't. And he went, no, but that's what's good about it. Not too sure. There's raw and there's raw, I don't think. And he went, no, I'm telling you. And then there was lots of to-ing and fro-ing. And then I think our Paul was one of the main, allies of Declan. I remember sitting with a bottle of wine, maybe 2, up on listening to the tracks, just deciding what was going to go on and not on the record. And Paul was very bullish, as was Declan, that these 2 curiosity pieces were like central to the theme of the record. And I was sort of outvoted. But yeah, I find it uncomfortable listening, let's put it that way, particularly for Let's Face It, for me. It just seems a bit...
and for me, listening to that album, it's one of those little gems, and you're definitely thinking, what was going on with Brendan on that track? But there is something really, really pure about it.
Yeah, I think that's what Declan reacted to. Declan's instincts are always good when it comes to that sort of stuff. I tend to be a wee bit more analytical and not necessarily, that sometimes is good and sometimes not so good. But in terms of just pure feel, I would always bow to his instincts, and he was very clear. And actually, so was Paul. If you're going to do this, then just go for it. Really go for it. You're trying to really make a record that's sort of saying, look, this isn't like not like the four of us you've heard before, but it's definitely it's got its own thing. It's got the courage of its own convictions, and that's actually part of the thing that you have to do when you're making a record. The biggest mistake you can make is to sort of play it safe. You've sort of got to just push it a bit, because you've never pushed it as far as you think you have. That's actually the reality. You're just, it's just the way it is, and I think he knew that on that song. But yeah, that song is, uncomfortable listening for me.
We spoke about the genius of Washington Down and Him for Her. And for me, Long Before I Make That Call is another one of those beautiful tracks. That's a gorgeous, gorgeous song.
That song to me is just a sort of it's a bit of a F-off song. Basically, you will never be hearing from me again. It's that sort of a song. And a lot of the time when we're making that record, Declan and Pat would be upstairs in that spare bedroom for hours toiling away, and I was usually downstairs trying to re-edit some lyric that they didn't like, or maybe they liked 3/4 of it but they didn't like the rest of it. It can literally take you hours just to come up with like 2 lines when you're doing lyrics. So they were like working on the production ideas, but they did this thing on that song. They called I think Pat called it the fridge or something, where it's an effect that comes in. It's a production technique. So it was 2 guitars, and then it makes it a bit more unusual sound from a production standpoint. It's like a chill factor in the actual music that sort of reflected the chill factor in the singer's lyrics. I remember coming up with a finished lyric for something else, and they had transformed this song so that when it came in with verse 2, they were looking at my face. So when this bit kicked in, I had never heard it before, and I went, what did you just do there? They did great work on that record. I mean, that record was made in a bedroom in a house in Sandham, the whole record, and once it worked, that record was a bit like the first record, it was, except this time we'd made a record. And on Songs for Tempted, we wrote the demos that we thought that the record never matched. I mean, that's pretty normal. You sort of you think, well, we lost something in the recording of the demos. Now the demos are the record. We'd made a record that thousands of people were buying, and it was made upstairs in our bedroom, and it worked. And we knew that we couldn't be stopped making more records, because our audience or a significant proportion of our audience were prepared to follow us into this uncharted territory, really. And we knew then that they were the sort of audience that were likely to follow us no matter what left or right turns we took from then on. And suddenly we felt very in control of of everything, with all the pain in the neck elements that entails. And it does involve a lot of pain in the neck elements. And in today's world, I think we're now entering an era where what we went through then and what we have done ever since, it will be the actual general way that it is done. I think that the labels, big labels, more and more will be licensing recordings rather than owning the recordings, and artists will be, their own videographers, and they will be the head of the marketing department and head of by the time the label's involved, I think moving forward to a large degree, they'll either own you or you won't need them. But you might take them just because, hey, they can scale you further. But the fact of the matter is you will already have proven that there's a significant market for what it is that you're doing. So for people like us, myself and Declan, it's reassuring for us that the industry has sort of moved in a direction that we were already in. I think we feel less at sea in the way the industry has gone than others might.
Can't you see we're sailing in the past? Weather has gone crazy and I can't put up the mast. No, I can't put up the mast. Because you're free. The sun will shine long before I make you mine. The rain will fall long before I make that call. Just an addict, you're waiting for the crash. No points for realizing nothing's here to last.
It's always been about great songs regardless, hasn't it?
I mean, that is it. Yeah, I think back then, in the earlier days, there was less songs. So a good song was more likely to get through. But now it's got to be great. Either that or you've got to have a serious amount of money, or the artist needs to be seriously beautiful. The fact of the matter is that it's not always. It's a mixture of a lot of things. You can have a great song and it goes nowhere. Sometimes it's about timing. Actually, all the time it's about timing. It's usually a great song with a career that's gaining momentum, often at times associated with a face that's really easy to look at. That's the way pop music has been actually forever. So when you're not playing that game, we have to work 3 times as hard on the song because we have none of the other things working for us.
So 1999, you have your 14 tracks, a brand new album, classified personal. Were you confident? Were you confident that, okay, we're back on track and we're ready to push this out into the world again?
Confident? I don't know. I was confident that it was a good record and I loved it. I loved the record and I knew we could tour it as a 2-piece, 3-piece. We didn't need the bells and whistles to go out and play the songs. But we spent money. We spent money promoting it. We spent money in the videos. We bought radio advertising. We did in-stores. We worked hard. That record, if it hadn't been worked, you need all those things. It is about the great songs. That's gets you in the playing field. But then you need to work, or somebody else needs to work at making sure that people are aware of it. And that was a very, very exhausting 12 months that followed. And we refused to give up on it. Like Change was the third single. But having said that, maybe it's you charted as well. But we worked very, very hard and we learned so much. We became different people after that record, in that we had a 360 view of what it took to get stuff out there. And we had a far greater appreciation of all the elements that are involved in making a record work. Everybody from the person that plugs the record, the single, to the video director, to the people in the shop. It's a lot of hats to wear, and that has remained the case.
What's the story of that album? What would you say, collectively?
I'd say the story of that album is really the sort of rebirth of the four of us as the way we wanted to continue, and a sort of a distillation of what it was that actually made the band mean something, which was really a couple of acoustic guitars and a good tune and a good story. Three things: a good story, a couple of acoustic guitars, and a good melody. Those three things. Very, very simple, really.
So before we sign off from the listeners, and we'll be back for another episode, what track will we sign off this album on?
Let's sign off on Time to Turn Around, because it was time to turn around, and this was the record we did it with.
So what if I call you up, cracked open with my eyes shut? It takes time to turn around, burned up on me every day. I need somewhere to hide away. It takes time to turn around. I'm going down to Belfast. I'm going down to Belfast. Take me out somewhere where I just don't care. Somewhere I can breathe and make you believe this time. Spent time on a few blind dates, asked how much money I made. It takes time to turn around. Class reunion day, I can't think of a word to say. It takes time to turn around. I'm going down to Belfast. and I won't get it wrong this time.
Thank you for listening to the Please Do Something podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, just send an email to Brian Murphy